Alex here with a high conflict child custody video on draining the accounts, specifically talking about draining the financial accounts, so the bank account, the savings account, child college fund, stuff like that. Again, I'm also talking specifically about a parent who drains all of the money out of the accounts. If it's just an ex who drained half of the money out of the accounts, there's probably nothing you can do about that because they only took their half, or at least that's what they're going to say in court. Most of the time, people who talk to me about this having happened to them don't really have a happy ending with regards to what the court did about it. Not saying they didn't win their case for other reasons, but I've never heard somebody say, yeah, I won my child custody case because my ex took all the money out of the accounts. In fact, most people are complaining that nothing bad really happened, like they didn't have to really suffer any consequences for it, aside from maybe like an admonition or something like that. I think a lot of times it gets murky because a lot of the people who take all of the money out of the accounts are also the same type of person who just take the kids with them and run. And so it ends up being one of those things where they can, sort of play around like, oh, I didn't know I was doing anything wrong. The kids needed the money and I was trying to do it just for the kids. I cared about the kids. That's why I stole all the money out of the accounts. It does feel like theft because the person who gets left behind with no money often has all this anxiety from trying to like make rent, put gas in the tank, buy groceries until they get their next paycheck. So it's not really going to be a happy video because I have no examples of anyone really figuring out how to leverage this. I do have a personal experience though because it did happen to me in my case. My ex took all the money out of the accounts and left, and then she went to court and lied and said I was the one who did it. So all I could really say to the court was if I was the one that took all the money out of the accounts, she would have proof. She would have like a paper trail or something. Um, she could have like gotten bank statements, or she could have gotten even like maybe surveillance from like an ATM because they have certain cameras in those ATMs, and she could have proved it to the court. When I told the judge that, he agreed and he asked them to show me or show him, that I took all the money, and they just said, never mind, we don't have any evidence, and they just dropped it. Um, in hindsight, I wish I had really pushed this issue because they distracted me by accusing me, but in reality, I could have been the one to go to the bank and have subpoenas issued and get proof and shown to the court that not only is she saying that I did something that I didn't do, but she's actually the one that did this. But really early on in my case, I was a complete and total newbie. I had no idea how anything worked. And so I didn't even know what a subpoena was. So I didn't do any of that. And now in hindsight, I kind of wish I did. I wish I could go back in time and tell myself, serve some subpoenas on the bank and get proof that your ex was the one that drained all the accounts, because that's what happened. So even in my own case, it wasn't necessarily something that hurt me because I did ultimately get what I wanted. I got joint physical custody anyway at that time. Later on, I got primary physical and terminated her parental rights. But at that point in time, when that issue was ripe, I got joint physical, which was what I wanted anyway. And so I was fine with it. I was happy. But just like all those other people who send me messages about this being a thing that really hurts and is scary, yet the judge and the court system doesn't really do anything about, I went through that exact same thing myself, and I wish that I had a better story to tell my viewers. I do have some advice though going forward for people who haven't gone through this yet, or for people who are in the middle of it. My advice is bring it up when it comes to the division of assets and debts, because you could argue that your ex took portions of the community property in bad faith that they shouldn't have taken, and you could argue for an unequal distribution of the division of assets and debts based on how much money they took out of the accounts that they shouldn't have taken out of the accounts. The other thing that I would say is if you can make a child custody issue out of it, do it, but otherwise don't waste your time with it. So for example, maybe your ex was a person who took all the money out of the accounts and left and did not take the kids, and they left the kids with you, the parent who has no money now. You could potentially make that into a serious child custody issue. You could cite the best interest factors, and you, unlike some of the other people who've been burned by this, might actually be able to turn it into a custody issue and win child custody based on that, because that's really messed up. If a parent leaves and you've still got the kids, and it's still messed up when they take the money and the kids. I'm not saying that's not messed up, but it's easier to make a custody issue out of it if they didn't take the children, because you can argue that you couldn't, buy the children food, that you almost ended up evicted, or you did end up evicted, or you had to like move in with your parents or something. You could really leverage that as child custody issue. Whereas oftentimes when they take the children and the money, they're able to sort of fend that off by saying they just cared a whole lot about the kids and needed all that money. It's not right, but it's often what they do. And with many of the people who've messaged me, that's exactly what happened. And the judge didn't really do anything about it. I still wanted to do a video on it because I can kind of help people a little bit with it. Of course, you can be more prepared to, if you think it's coming, if you think a separation's coming, you can hopefully be the first one, and hopefully you just take out half of the money, not all of it. I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video. If anyone has any personal experience on this having happened to them, please post in the comments below.